There we go.
Welcome, everybody. This is the KubeVirt Community Meeting, November 11th, 2020. First topic on the agenda is I'll turn it over to Edward Haas to talk about IP extraction.
Oh, hi. So I think this topic was raised a few weeks back. I don't remember when, but it's about the reporting of the IP addresses in the VMI status for the interfaces. And we had a problem there that Martin I posted a PR there that we reported in some cases when the guest agent was active, we reported with the CIDR information, I mean the mask. And if it was not, if guest agent was not active there, we will report it without the mask, without the CIDR, only the IP address. And in the last, and this is also not only relevant for the, I think it was only relevant, the inconsistency only for the pod network, but in any case, the decision was that we will always report only the IP address in that field, so we'll be consistent with the pod. But so removing the CIDR was agreed, and we should only use the IP. But now the second question, that's the one that I want to raise here, is that we do need to represent the CIDR somehow. So one option was, and I remember it was discussed, that we will just use either raw information, what the guest agent gave us under a new subtree in the status. So we'll just take whatever it gives us or format it. So I don't know what, this is one option. And the second one is to add the CIDR information or the mask itself under the same tree as another field. So I want to ask what is others' opinion on this. So I can share what is my opinion is that I prefer to have it in a separate subtree only for the guest agent, and that's because this CIDR field, if it will appear under the interfaces, it will sometime appear there and sometime it will not appear there because the guest agent is on or off. So someone who access this API will first need to check if it's there or not. And I think that's not so nice. It also, in some cases, repeats the information because the CIDR includes the IP itself. So, but that's my opinion. So the question is open here. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Well, it sounds like you answered your own question, if I understood. Yeah, when we last talked about this, we had also agreed that there would not be a canonical one IP field. We would use a list of IPs, right?
Yeah, that's already in place. Yeah, and yes, there was. You are talking about one detail. There is like when there is currently one IP and IPs. The single IP is just because of the backward compatibility. So that's not. I don't think this is the question. Is if we add another field that is called CIDR, should we have one or only the multiple ones? But I'm talking about something before that. Should we even have this field, for example?
Well, I'm conflicted because on the one hand, if we put it in a well-formed field underneath the network section, or excuse me, the IP addresses in that same area, then we're implying that it's going to be well formatted. But it sounds like it can be variable. If we put it inside the guest agent information, then we're basically just we're hands off and we're saying, well, this is what the guest agent said. We're out of the loop there, and there would be no guarantees in formatting in that case, right?
So I think if we put it in the guest agent section, there is their formatting. Their format is, I think, is a JSON format. So we could even format it there. But I think what you just said before that about the field under the interfaces with the IP, it's not that it's not formatted. We can format it that we will say it's called CIDR and then we give an IP / the mask. The problem is that this field will not always appear. So this field will only appear if the guest agent is there, and if the guest agent is not there, it will not appear. So it's like you need to give. It's like a logic that you need to provide to the user that this is what is happening. That field is only there if the guest agent is there, and this field is not there if the guest agent is not there. So this is what I don't like about this API to put a field. Uh, that's it.
Well, I agree that in my opinion, it needs to be consistent, like you're saying. Um, so I think your concern then is that if we're given the CIDR and we throw it out so that we are consistent with just using IPs, then we've lost information we were given, right?
Yes, that's the main concern that I mean. We
Well, let
lost
me ask
the
you this:
information.
who's using it? Why would anybody want the CIDR? I get that it's it's important, but what's the use case? Why do we need it?
So okay, so first of all, they can get it if we give them in the guest agent. They can get it there. But yes, the question is valid. So the reason that it is important, it's because it depends what they want to know about the VM. So for example, in secondary addresses or in cases where secondary interface, sorry, it matters what is the subnet, not only the IP. So if someone wants to use this VMI, they may need to know in what subnet to operate in, for example, and they may need to query that in order to know what to do. Maybe they configure their own pod or VM based on this information. I don't know. That could be the case. It's for example, someone can. There is even an easier one. If the operator needs to manage or troubleshoot the one who uses the VM, so they can use this information to understand that the user configured it wrongly, and for example, configure two subnets that are overlapping as an example, or wrong subnets or stuff like that. So it is useful in some cases, but
Okay, that's
but
great.
I don't
Both.
know if yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, go on.
No, I'm saying I don't know of anyone using it. I'm not even sure they use it, and I'm not sure if we need to care much. But if we provide the information, like in a sub under the guest agent, I think we are safe. So we can tell them, okay, look there.
I think that the two use cases that you came up with, the information consumer in this case was a human being, um, which means that if that's truly the target audience is for convenience of humans, because this information is available if you can log into the node, but it's circular because you have to log in to be able to get the IP. Because it's humans that are consuming it, I think it's fair game to put it in an unformatted agent info section.
Okay, we again yes, we can even format that section of the guest agent because we know the format, so we could do it. But it's like it's up to us, I guess. I don't want to do to overwork. So it sounds to me like embedded JSON is good enough.
Yeah, well, there's 19 people on the call. Is there anybody else that has a opinion on the matter?
Not really an opinion, but rather a question, I guess. So it's a noob question. So I don't know. Basically, what's the current behavior? So right now, where can you see subnet information? And I'm asking this in the context you were asking. Okay, sometimes it will be here, sometimes it will not be here. Does this happen currently without the PR in place?
So currently, what happened is that there is a field called IP and IPs under the VMI status, and it is the problem is that it is inconsistent. It depends if guest agent is installed or not.
Right.
And based on that, you will have the format of the IP either as just a single IP without the mask,
Okay.
or as a CIDR, which is an IP with plus mask.
Okay, then I think regarding your concern was if we add this CIDR field, sometimes it will be populated, sometimes it will be empty, or it will not be there. That's not too inconsistent. It would actually be consistent with what happens now, right? It would actually
No,
be.
no. Now it's yes. So it's the field will be inconsistent. So the field will exist or not exist in some
Right.
cases. So
At
it's not
least,
exactly the same, because you cannot, if someone reads it, a program reads it, he cannot assume it's there. It needs to check if it's there and only then consume it.
right, the same as now, right? Sometimes, but
No.
at least the difference would be that the IP field at least would always be an IP, not sometimes an IP and sometimes an IP/mask.
So now the field is there, but the content can be changed, right? So it's a bit
Right.
different, but in terms of data, it's the same. In terms of how it looks in the API is different. One is about the content changing, and the other is about the field exists or not. I hope
Right.
I explained it well.
Clear as mud.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, but I think it's still an improvement, right? At least with the change, the IP field would always be there and consistently having an IP, not an IP and a mask.
Yes, the IP part, we agree that the current IP field
Right.
will be always an IP without CIDR. Will always be like, that's the first change. The second
Right.
change is in question here. The second change says, should we put all the guest agent information in a raw format under a section of its own, not related to interfaces, just as like a generic subtree in the status, or should we add another field under the interfaces that is an addition to the IP field? So it, for example, it will, one field is called IPs and the second field will be called CIDRs. That's the case now.
I would pretty strongly lean towards putting it in the guest agent info and steer you that way. And the rationale behind that assertion is that sometimes we get guest agent information, sometimes we don't, and it can be updated. And so if the VM is changing IPs, when we put it, if we were to put it in the networking information fields, do we know for sure we own those values when if we get an updated list of IPs, for instance, from the guest agent, does the guest agent really know that the IPs in that field belong to it and it can change them? If we keep it underneath the guest agent section, if you will, it knows for sure that, and humans know for sure that that's where that information came from.
Yes, I agree, and there is another, even a stronger. I can add to your point that there is also a case today that the IPs that you see under the interfaces are not really what you have inside the VM. For example, if you have the masquerade binding, the IPs inside the VM are totally different from the IPs outside. So that's another example when if we always depend if the user wants to depend on the guest agent information, he will see exactly what's in the VM and we don't mask it or translate it somehow.
Okay, any other thoughts before we move on to the next subject? All right, is there anything else that we want to talk about in the agenda notes, or should we turn it over to Pep? All right, Pep, floor is yours, sir.
Right. Just a quick mention that KubeCon and Cloud Native Con is next week, and KubeVirt will be present a bit. There is a session on, there's a link here. I think it's on Friday. Let me check. Yes, Friday. On high performance KubeVirt in action. And also the Red Hat booth will organize a few office hours, and one of them will be dedicated to KubeVirt on Thursday at noon Eastern time. This will be a 1 hour slot open to anyone to come and ask questions directly to, representatives of KubeVirt, and we'll talk about, discuss roadmap or anything that people want to talk about.
And I did see at one point earlier a final call for volunteers. Is the roster full? Do we have the list of people we need?
We have enough, let's say we have enough people, and I'll get back on that thread. But the more the merrier. I mean, more people are welcome. There is no, let's say there is no limit. And because KubeVirt has multiple components, like right now you were talking about networking, and so far there's no one lined up who has, who is a specialist in networking. And, if a specific question arises is about networking, we might be a bit short, but well, anyway, so in other words, you're welcome to join as well.
Okay. Any thoughts on that? Any questions?
And especially, there is no set agenda for this office hours. It's an open space to discuss, but, we can bring ideas. We would be very welcoming, for example, questions around moving, real world scenarios, test environments you're using it, production environments you're using it, and challenges that you might be facing before moving between one and the other. This type of conversation would be a great topic to bring to the office hours. But anything else is also welcome.
Thanks, Pat. All right. Any other topics we want to cover today before we conclude? All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
But
Thank you.